Hi everyone, this is Humiak, and today I'm going to talk about the 1.2 update to the Kiwi tech tree mod. Now, this is a lot of the changes are behind the scenes, but in terms of my theme for this update was really sort of choose your own adventure, and that was kind of based off of a lot of those books that I spent way too much time reading as a kid, oftentimes ending up dying of some disaster or another. So I guess that's sort of fitting for a Kerbal Space Program. Now, one thing that might have been obvious to some people who spent time going through the config files in my mod, and maybe a lot of you probably didn't because you enjoyed playing the game more than looking at text files, is that there is a file that I've created called Kiwi config, which previously had some limited flexibility in terms of changing the multipliers for engine upgrades and specific impulse, and that again may not be super obvious to a lot of people who had just downloaded. Now I've gone through based off of some feedback from some users and have provided a little bit more flexibility in terms of what the mod can and cannot do. So I'll so if you're at all interested, you can go under the Kerbal Space Program, the main sort of game folder, go to game data, go to Kiwi tech tree, and you'll be wanting to look at a file called kiwi config.cfg. Now you can open that up in your favorite note or text editor. I like Notepad++, but Notepad will work perfectly fine. And we can open up this and you'll see just this lot of wall of text, and I'll try to kind of go through a few of the major options here to kind of give you an idea of what's changed. Now, if you've already started a save game and you're pretty keen on not changing anything, may at least not want to change anything, or at least at the very least create a backup of your save before you make any big changes. Now, what you'll see here is just a bunch of different sort of options, or these sort of switches for various upgrades, like the battery upgrades, which you'll see, right, which had battery density, engine upgrades, command upgrades, fuel tanks, etc., etc. Now, most of them are switched on except for this switch for Kerbal Engineer, which if you happen to have Kerbal Engineer, if you turn it on, it will just add the Kerbal Engineer modules to all probes from the beginning of the game. So, it's maybe a little bit of a cheat, but I find that somewhat annoying having to remember to add the parts to it. But if you would like to play the Kiwi tech tree mod more as sort of a standard tech tree, you can turn off these upgrades and it will generally act pretty close to sort of what you would see if you were playing probes before crew or on Kerbal Start, and that might be very appealing for a lot of players. Now, I still go through and will change some aspects of engine performance on occasion. Just there's only a limit on how much I want to sort of pre-program in enabling or disabling options. This was relatively straightforward to enable without getting too cumbersome to maintain in the future. So, and since I was a requested feature, something I've been thinking about, I've went through and done it for the 1.2 upgrade. Now, other things I've added as well. Now, I've added some potential changes in terms of science values. Now, I had modified them slightly if you follow through and read through the descriptions that I provided on the forum or on GitHub. But I've added a couple more options. So the default value is what you would have already been playing with, right, which then generally sets the science experiments caps to be equal to the base values and has some small tweaks to some values in some scenarios. Generally will reduce the amount of science able to be transferred for experiments, right, that like mystery goo or the material bay. Now, you can change the science value to stock, and that will then take you back to sort of the stock experiment settings. Or alternatively, you can change the science values to a sort of, I guess, quote unquote, hard mode, and that's going to reduce the base value and cap for science experiments, particularly amongst science experiments that are unmanned, so ones that are like not mystery goo, right? Don't really need sort of a return capsule to Kerbin to get science from. So that was closer to what you would have seen in probes before crew. That actually had been intended to be the default setting initially, but it didn't make it in. And rather than changing things for save games that might already be in progress, is now defined as the hard mode. Other options as well, this is probably more relevant if you're, again, starting a new game, is there's now a couple new options for the tech tree in terms of the amount of science points it takes to unlock. So I've now added a hard mode. Sorry, the default mode is what you would have already seen. The hard mode then adds some additional points, particularly to the early tech tree nodes, to make it a little bit more of a challenge to progress. There's also an adaptive mode, which then has this multiplier that's going to be based off of some relatively science-heavy mods. So things like Blue Dog Design Bureau, which I don't have a part set up and ready to go yet for this mod, but just kind of setting up for the future. Obviously, right, your D Magic Orbital Science. I think Tantaris, the SP, which I think is the sort of probes, sort of submods of Tantaris, so, and I think like Total Aerospace will, right? So each one then will basically be sort of additive. So the more sort of science heavy mods you have, right, the higher points that it will require to unlock science nodes, and right, which will then be more reflective in terms of early tiers, right? So so you're not going to end up having like 50,000 points to unlock tier 12, so it'll be just like 10,000 and 200 or something on that order. So it'll be a little bit higher, but not like excessively higher, because at some point, could already be a bit of a grind at the end to unlock some points. So that's really kind of what's new on kind of behind the scenes. In the future, we have some ideas. This is not an idea that's been implemented. It will probably be a little bit later on, kind of what I'm thinking, kind of a couple months down the track, will be to allow users to have some flexibility in terms of managing costs. So like in terms of balance, everyone has different ideas about how costs should be balanced, particularly across different types of parts. Right now, I don't know if I'll be planning on doing tons of cost balancing, because that's really time consuming and not really fun to do. But if anyone has a particular sort of plans or ideas about how things, like we may think that batteries are too expensive for cost, so you can maybe change that to 0.5 and have that 50% of, let's say, what the current sort of stock costs are. And or you might think they're too cheap and you want them at, let's say, 200%. So this will allow you to change. Now, this is, you can change these numbers all you want right now, and they will not do anything because it's not actually tied to any parts. But I think the first mod that will have it is Tantaris, which will be next week, hopefully. And then we'll sort of progressively get some parts as I add support, and then we'll sort of retroactively go back and support stock and all the other mods that I've already done. But there's some sort of tedious sort of elements of me copying and pasting a few lines of code into sort of existing patches. So I'm not looking forward to that. And of course, as you can see, we also, as I had mentioned earlier, we have all these different multipliers that you can go through and edit. And if you do want to change sort of how upgrades handle, particularly engine upgrades. Now, of course, I would generally recommend to not edit this document itself, because right, every time that I'm going to update the Kiwi tech tree, right, these values obviously, right, will change, and you'll have to go back and re-edit. So I've given you an example. So in the new sort of zip file that for 1.2, there will be an extras, and within the extras, you will see there will be sort of an example patch in which we turn off all the upgrades. So that gives you an idea of how Actually, I have not tested this patch. I'm pretty sure it works. I don't think there's any reason why I shouldn't, but if it doesn't work, just do let me know. Um, but in general, I would suggest creating a module manager patch to edit the values and put it in a personal folder. Make sure, so it doesn't get overwritten anytime that I update. I think unless, something terribly, I need to make a huge change for some reason, right? Basically the variable names aren't going to change. And you don't have to change every value. You only have to edit the values that you want to change. And so even if I add new variables later to the original config, right, your personal patches should stay safe. Okay, I know this video is probably getting a bit long. It's already looking like it's over 11 minutes, but I'll just keep on talking because just one last sort of bit. Some of you, I know, don't speak English as your native language. I could probably say a few words in Spanish, asking about where the bathroom is or where is your nearest library. But no, my conversational sort of languages are only sort of in English, if that. So I have started creating localization support. So if anyone would like to volunteer some time to add in some localization support, your support would be greatly appreciated. But obviously, right, it's not going to happen unless a lot of people start demanding it. So going forward, I'll start making sure that anytime I change titles of parts, they'll have localization support. But if no one's asking, I'm probably not going to really spend a lot of time retroactively going through and adding these. So, if you care enough, let me know. And if you don't, I'm probably not going to change it because, life is short and I only have so many hours in the day. Okay. Now, lastly, I just want to go through and make a note because some of you may notice that in the 1.2 update, I have done a bit of a tweak on some of the aerospace parts. I did get a little bit of feedback from some people who've played through and noted that if they have kind of a fairly stock experience, some of the airplanes experience can be a bit of a challenge on getting planes that can really unlock points or really do much. So I've gone through and moved a lot of structural parts for airplanes earlier in the tech tree. So what you'll see now, this might be quite small for you, and you'll see a few mods here. But in terms of some of the stock pieces, you'll see some of the stock sort of elevons and wing connectors a little earlier in the tech tree at early flight. You'll see some other parts on, oops, that is, let's see here. Yeah, I think, yeah, we've got a couple of new pieces here. I've moved the Weasley fan earlier in the tech tree. I've moved some of the rotors earlier in the tech tree as well, so they might hopefully be useful. One thing, so at least what we know, at least with the Weasley, again, I'm not the best pilot, but I can get supersonic with the Weasley. And I feel that within a relative time frame of, thinking about Kerbal crew here, having the ability to go supersonic in tier 2, I think makes sense. That way we're not spending time, going around with slow sort of Juno jet forever. And then I've added the Panther afterburning turbofan into aviation, so that will hopefully make your plane experience a little bit more enjoyable early on, so you don't have to feel like you're having to really push through sort of areas that are not very fun. Now, a lot of it is still, I really enjoy the Mark 1 stock like open cockpit mod. That's really one of my favorite mods that's been recently updated, and you'll find those parts in the start. It makes you know, especially if you have giving aircraft purpose, that contract pack. I think that works really great. You know, that barnstorming contract works great with a combination of uh, what is the engine here. I'm just going to go on a tangent here and say, you know, I've put on the Spud engine. And so that, along with some of the Mark 1 parts, makes doing that contract a lot of fun. But obviously, right, that's not necessary. But you know, if you do like planes, I think it's really hard to say that you shouldn't be getting the airplane plus and the Mark 1 stock like open cockpit mods. I think those are probably pretty necessary if you like that. But if not, you know, there's definitely a lot of other paths you can go for the game. Okay, so I think that is it for this update, and yeah, thanks again for listening. And if you have any comments or questions, you know, please feel free to leave any questions or comments on the forum. I have a Discord server as well, so you feel free to go there and ask questions if you don't want to go onto the forums. Okay, have a good day.